In the early 1820s, the story begins with Hugh Glass talking to his son Hawk, explaining that despite feeling scared and wishing for an end to his troubles, he should keep fighting as long as he can take a breath. As Glass speaks, we glimpse scenes of Glass with his Pawnee wife and son, his home being set on fire, and him holding his wife in his arms. Glass and Hawk, along with other men from their hunting group, walk through a river while tracking elk. They are camping near a river in the countryside of Missouri with fellow fur trappers, under the leadership of their captain, Andrew Henry. A naked member of their party who was missing arrives at the camp and falls forward with an arrow in his back. Another man is struck in the neck by an arrow and falls into the campfire. The hunting party is ambushed by a local tribe of Iroquois Indians, also known as Uri. The men defend themselves using their rifles. Glass is attacked and almost strangled, but he is saved by one of his companions. Some of the men gather their furs and supplies and head towards a boat to escape. The Iroquois are searching for the chief's daughter, Powaka, who was taken by unidentified white men. The men leave behind their boat and begin trekking overland to Fort Kiowa. Hawk faces discrimination from John Fitzgerald due to his mixed heritage. Hawk is half Indian from his mother's side, but Glass steps in to protect his son and advises him not to respond to Fitzgerald. While out in the forest, Glass encounters a grizzly bear and her cubs, leading to a sudden attack by the larger bear. He struggles to fend off the bear's vicious claws and bites, ultimately shooting her but failing to kill her. In a desperate struggle, Glass resorts to using his knife, stabbing the bear multiple times as they tumble down a hill, with Glass ending up in a gully beneath the dead bear. Later, his companions find him and attempt to tend to his severe wounds. Meanwhile, the Iroquois warriors persist in their search for Powaka, encountering French fur traders and trading furs for horses. Despite their efforts to transport Glass on a makeshift stretcher, he proves to be a burden, causing them to slow down and struggle in their journey. Fitzgerald suggests mercy killing Glass to end his suffering, but Henry cannot bring himself to do it. Offering payment to anyone willing to stay with Glass, Henry ultimately raises the offer to $100, convincing even Fitzgerald to stay until Glass passes away. Glass, still in agony, experiences visions of his wife and the day his home was destroyed. In a private moment, Fitzgerald urges Glass to let him end his suffering to prevent further delays or deaths, including that of Hawk. Since Glass cannot speak, Fitzgerald proposes that Glass should blink to signal his agreement, knowing that Glass would eventually blink whether or not he intends to agree. Glass keeps his eyes open for an extended period before closing them, which Fitzgerald deliberately interprets as blinking, prompting him to begin suffocating Glass. Hawk arrives and witnesses Fitzgerald smothering his father. In a desperate attempt to seek help from Bridger, Hawk calls out, leading to a struggle with Fitzgerald, who stabs Hawk in the abdomen and leaves him to bleed out while Glass watches helplessly. Fitzgerald disposes of Hawk's body and lies to Bridger about his whereabouts. Later that night, Fitzgerald pressures Bridger to move on with him, claiming to have spotted Indians near the creek. Having already prepared a grave for Glass, Fitzgerald forcibly drags him into the hole and partially buries him alive under dirt, despite Bridger's reluctance. Meanwhile, Henry and the hunting party face challenges as they march towards Fort Kiowa. As Fitzgerald and Bridger approach them, Bridger realizes Fitzgerald lied about seeing the Ree by the creek. Bridger aims his rifle at Fitzgerald, who wrests it from him and turns it back on Bridger. He pulls the trigger, but the rifle is unloaded, clicking on an empty chamber, and they continue on their way. Glass regains consciousness and weakly struggles to emerge from the dirt. He begins crawling through the woods in search of food and warmth, stumbling upon Hawk's frozen body in the cold. Glass promises to stay with his son and grabs a thick bear pelt to keep warm. He forages for roots and old bone marrow to sustain himself and attempts to start a fire for added warmth. Using leftover gunpowder, he tries to seal the wound in his throat. As the Indians draw near, Glass rides down the rapids to evade them. Meanwhile, Fitzgerald and Bridger continue their journey and stumble upon a burned-down settlement littered with bodies. Bridger quietly leaves some food for a woman emerging from her burnt hut. Growing colder and hungrier, Glass wades into the river and catches a live fish. Upon climbing a hill, he encounters a Pawnee Indian feasting on a bison carcass. Approaching cautiously, Glass signals for food, and the Indian tosses him an organ, which Glass devours eagerly. In the morning, the Indian notices Glass's bare wounds festering. Glass reveals that his men left him for dead and killed his son. The Indian shares that his own family fell victim to a rival Sioux tribe and seeks out more Pawnee. Fitzgerald and Bridger reunite with their party at the outpost. Fitzgerald informs Henry that they couldn't rescue Glass or Hawk and collects his payment, while Bridger, though upset, refuses a bonus. Meanwhile, Glass and the Indian press forward, spending the evening peacefully catching snowflakes in their mouths, a rare moment of serenity for Glass. The Native American gathers materials to set up a sweat lodge quickly and puts a feverish Glass inside. Glass starts hearing his wife's voice and then sees himself walking toward Hawk before they embrace in an old church. The Pawnee conducts a healing ritual for Glass wounds. When Glass wakes up, the Pawnee is gone. Shortly after, he notices that the Native American has been executed by the French fur trappers. He sneaks into their camp and witnesses one of the men assaulting a woman, Powaka. Glass holds the rapist at gunpoint and releases Powaka. He then takes a horse and releases the other horses. Riding to a spot in the woods, he makes a fire for himself. In the morning, the tribe searching for Powaka begins to attack. Glass defends himself with his rifle before mounting his horse and riding away. The tribe chases him on horseback until they reach a cliff, where Glass and his horse fall over the edge. The horse dies, and Glass is injured again. As night falls and the cold worsens, he guts the horse, removes its organs, and takes refuge inside its carcass for warmth. When he wakes up, he exits the carcass and moves to a snow cave. There, he carves the words, "Fitzgerald killed my son." Later at the fort, a French trapper brings glass water bottle left by Bridger at the burial site. Mistakenly thinking it belonged to Hawk, Henry organizes a search through the forest, where they discover Glass limping towards them. They escort him back to the fort, only to find Fitzgerald missing. The trapper informs them that Fitzgerald was rumored to be heading to Texas and had stolen the party's funds. Enraged, Henry confronts Bridger, physically punishing him and locking him up. Glass defends Bridger, explaining he was just obeying instructions, and reveals how he witnessed Fitzgerald murdering his son. Determined to pursue Fitzgerald, Glass urges Henry to allow him to accompany the hunt, a request reluctantly granted. They track down Fitzgerald, devising a plan to capture him from different directions. However, their encounter ends tragically, with Fitzgerald fatally shooting Henry in a confrontation. Glass discovers Henry's lifeless body and props him back onto his horse using a branch. They continue riding, visible to Fitzgerald, who shoots his rifle from afar. Believing he has taken down Glass, Fitzgerald has actually shot Henry's body. Glass retaliates, injuring Fitzgerald, who flees as Glass gives chase. They confront each other in the forest, exchanging gunfire. Fitzgerald dashes down to the creek, where Glass locates him, and a physical altercation ensues. Despite Fitzgerald's attempt to stab Glass, Glass turns the tables and nearly kills him. However, Fitzgerald pleads that avenging his son's death won't undo the past. On the opposite side of the creek, Glass spots the Native Americans who had been trailing him, now accompanied by Powaka. He decides to leave justice to a higher power, pushing Fitzgerald into the water, where he drifts towards the Indians. The chief seizes Fitzgerald and dispatches him with his knife. Recognizing Glass's compassion in freeing her, Powaka persuades the tribe to spare him. Despite achieving vengeance, Glass remains solitary, wandering through the frigid terrain. He collapses, witnessing a vision of his wife, walking into the light once more. The film concludes with tears welling in Glass's eyes. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell if you want to watch more videos like this. Thank you for watching and see you again soon. Take care.